Now, a lot of you think, or a lot of people think, a lot of people tell me, that work isn't supposed to be fun. That you're supposed to work hard, as shown by this, and then you're supposed to play hard. And that liking your job or being passionate about your job is just an unlikely side effect added on the end. Now let's think. Why is that? We grow up as kids thinking that we want to be astronauts, we want to be chefs, we want to be cooks, we want to be teachers, we even want to be cowboys. But along the way, we change. Then we become adults who just want to become either, say, like doctors, lawyers, or CEOs because society says that those jobs are better because they pay more. Worse, society says that following your passion is unrealistic. And even worse of all is that they say that you shouldn't follow a passion that can't support you. Well, I think that there's no such thing as a passion that can't support you, right? I think that you should always be able to go and follow your passion. Always work towards it. Because I've seen people who go and they're creative in applying their passion to something that they like and something that can support them, right? And how should I know this? Because I went through it myself. Back when I was younger, I used to do a lot of different things. Like, say, I don't know, electronics, or inventing, or even making YouTube videos. Though I only think I got like 5 subscribers, which is nothing. But I would always drop them after a couple weeks because I would get bored of them. That was my cycle. I would always go pick something up and then drop it soon after. But the only 2 things that it came back to were dreaming and writing. And the ironic thing about writing is that I didn't even like writing at first. It was just that whenever I had some cool idea or, invention or dream that I wanted to tell my parents, they'd always tell me, "Son, you should write it down so you can keep it fresh." And so I would do that. And I'd also try to draw it out, but I'm a terrible drawer. So I would always do that. And to me, at the time, writing was only a necessity that I used to record some more interesting or better fad or thing I was doing at the time. In fact, you could say that I hated writing, right? Yeah. But I realized that some of my ideas that I came up with were stories. And so after, like wrestling with myself and being like, no, I don't want to write, but I have to write because these are amazing and I got to share it with people, I would reluctantly put the pen tip on the paper or the hands on the keyboard later and start writing. Now, when I was a kid, I would always go and move around a lot, as I was introduced as doing. And I would switch schools every year since 4th grade, and I'm in 11th grade now. Now, what this meant was that I had to say goodbye to all of my friends every single year and the places I was familiar with. But in return, I got to visit new places and meet new friends as well. Having all these cultural backgrounds I could see really made it so that I could see and live how being in different cultures really colors your opinions on things. The biggest thing I can think of off the top of my head is, say, putting on your shoes in your house. In America, it's perfectly fine to, wear shoes in the middle of your house, right? But in Japan, even though they're usually really tolerant about other cultures, they have a zero tolerance policy on that, especially if it's a tatami room, because those are expensive. And so I was on the Japanese side of this. And so when I first moved to, Salt Lake City, Utah, home of the busy bees, I was faced with the most dire and alien conflict ever. The family I was visiting wanted me to wear my shoes in their house. Now, after a couple bouts of some really passive-aggressive, polite suggesting, I eventually got to take off my shoes anyway. at the compromise that I couldn't wear my socks either, which was an experience, right? But I learned through all of that that having something so small as, like, say, whether or not you take your shoes on or off in your house can really alienate people. And it's taken in different ways in, say, different cultures. And so I could go and, put that kind of stuff in my book, that kind of cultural, problems and stuff. Now, anyway, back to the more interesting thing, which is my dreams. I saw my dreams, and I knew they were interesting, and I knew people would love them if I could just show them, but I really didn't know how. And then I read my first fantasy book. Now, I loved these stories as a kid because they would go and have all these crazy and kooky ideas. For example, they would have these mystical creatures that I could never even think of, such as, say, the Ursus ferox, who was this vicious, angry red bear, right? That if you could get past the, gnashing teeth and the swinging claws, you could find the softest belly fur known to man. Or, say, schools that could go and teach you about your talents or find powers and stuff, which was amazing to me as a kid because I always wanted to have powers like the characters in the books. And as my parents will tell you, the countless hours I've spent in my room trying to Hadoken have been fruitless. So just know that. But anyway, moving back to here. Right. Finally, the imagery was top-notch. You could really see the millions of teeny tiny rainbow crystals in Crystal Cavern, and thanks to the writers. And when the sun would rise to just the perfect height, you could see this light penetrate the waterfall that was concealing the cavern, reflect off these tiny crystals, and then dazzle anyone inside with hundreds of thousands of colors. I always wanted to show that to people. And so I wondered how to do it, right? And so what I first went to is theater, because I used to go to a lot of opera plays, and even though I fell asleep during most of them, I always realized how important they were in showing people-to-people interactions. They were perfect at it, because these were real people. But I realized that the imagery didn't have nearly the wow factor I wanted, because they're just stage props, and naturally people don't really believe that they're there. And so I had to give up on that. And the next thing was drawing, right? Drawing could go and show anything you wanted as long as you were skilled enough. And it didn't take that much money. And you could chain these drawings together and tell a story, or comic, if you will. But I immediately threw the idea out because, again, as I told you, I'm terrible at drawing. So I finally took one look at the fantasy books that I love so much, and I realized that, dislike it though I may, I'd have to go back to writing. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A couple years ago, my friend Austin came over to a sleepover. And he, knowing that I occasionally wrote stories, such as this fine beauty, asked me to write him a story. And even though he had to ask me a couple times, when he came back after going and getting like some Cheetos or something, he saw a paragraph. Or more correctly, he saw a story about binary dragons and pirates with golden wings and mythical creatures all working to fend off these natural disasters like tornadoes to protect their equally creative homes. And as he was reading this, I think that's where it clicked for me. That I realized as I saw him smile as he was reading over the characters that I only got to characterize with two words, which is a faux pas in writer, history, if you will, that I liked making people smile when they read my stories. I liked it. I liked making these worlds just like my idolized fantasy writers of past. And so from that day on, I made a kind of oath that I would go and try to make more stories to go and spread smiles across more people. And so I tinkered with that one paragraph, and I built the world, this entire amazing, dream world, as I would soon call it, where you had this kooky world. And so basically the story follows Stardust, who is a human, which is rare because people usually look down on humans because they're like, dude, are you not even creative to like even be something else? Felicity, who is a bipedal cat, and Silvering, who is the Pegasi, and a bunch of other characters going on their journeys. Now the key word here is journeys. I hated the idea that, stories would have this, one long overarching story throughout an entire book. I thought that was boring. It would never hold my attention span for that long, as you can see, because I give up on everything. So I realized in order to make this more accessible to everyone, I made it so that each chapter was its own special story. Now this made each chapter go and be a little bit longer, but it made it so that it was much more varied. Plus it's all connected. Like if I were to go and draw the, timeline of say a normal story, it would be a straight line. If I tried to draw a connection between all the chapters between my story, there's a connection there, but it looks like a yarn ball. And so I always thought that, maybe I could go and make something cool. But then the problem became, how would I make these chapters? And so I basically went, okay, so what have I seen in my dreams? And I think I tapped out that reserve in one chapter. And then I went and I said, okay, my dreams don't cut it in Dreamworld. What is something I really wish could happen, that I think would be cool, that I think would be paradise, but not paradise at the same time because there's real people there? And so I came up with the idea for my second chapter, which was, you have, Stardust, who is this kind of, happy-go-lucky guy. He's an inventor, which is actually a pretty important job in Dreamworld because some people are kind of unimaginative. And he goes to this, battle arena and stuff, because Silvering, his friend, takes him there. And then he accidentally steps on the tail of the most vicious combatant there is. And so she forces him to, fight her. And because of his moral compass, he's like, oh no, okay, so I have to go and not hurt her as much as possible, and also prevent myself from being hurt by her as much as possible, and also end this match as soon as possible. And I think the cool part about this specific chapter was this is the part where I decided to be even more creative. And I said, you know what? Having an entire book full of paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs is boring. It's just one format over and over. Oh, look, I'm going to read this paragraph. I wonder what's under this paragraph. It's another paragraph. So I decided to try to, mix it up a little. And so this is where I came up with, ta-da, dual channel mode, where this is basically, on the same page, I'm having two people say their perspectives at the same time. Now, this is helpful because two reasons. A, you can pick who you want to read first, because favoritism is something I allow. And two, you can see what's happening at the same time from both people's perspectives. When someone's thinking, like say, when Silvering is thinking, or not Silvering, Stardust is thinking, oh snap, Felicity, which is the combatant, spoilers, is about to beat him up. At the same time, she's like, man, I'm gonna beat this guy up. So as you can see, it has new meaning. And so I decided to work around with how we convey information in writing. And I think even later, I had one part where I had, a psychic who's trying to go and enter another person's mind. And so I start with dual channel mode, just like before. But each narrative is in their minds, of course. And then I have the psychic's, paragraphs start to meld into hers, her mind. And so to wrap this up, because I'm going overtime here, sorry. I'm just so excited for my book, man. Because I want to make you all happy. So I'm a writer. And I made this stuff. I'm being creative. So what? Why did I tell you all this stuff before? Well, because the moral of my kind of sucky story is the fact that you should try as much stuff as possible. Because everything I do helped me to go and make my book. I always draw on my experiences to go and help me write it. So it's so much easier for me to say that my little inventor Stardust here, when he wants to go and shorten a wire, first he cuts it, right? And then he goes and strips the wire and solders it on. And then he goes and, uses an air dryer and, heats a plastic sleeve over it and fuses it. And then, ta-da! I make a shorter wire. Now that's worthless because it's an extension cable and now it's super short. And this drawing took like 3 hours, so now you can tell my skill level. But anyway, to wrap it up, try as many things as you can, because you're guaranteed to like one. And even the stuff that you happen to realize isn't your passion is going to help you with a real passion eventually. Thank you.